Hello, you are listening to Emily and Colin, and we're here talking about news and stuff.
We are. Stuff and things.
Stuff and things.
Yeah. And our top story today, a court has ruled that detained children must have soap and other basic needs. Migrant children detained by the U.S. government must have access to soap, toothpaste, and other basic hygiene products, as well as edible food, clean water, and places to sleep. A panel of judges has so ruled. The Trump administration has said that children must only be given safe and sanitary conditions, and this doesn't mean they must have basic hygiene. However, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco tossed out the government's challenge to a lower court's finding that authorities had failed to provide safe and sanitary conditions. Back in June, a Trump lawyer tried to argue that the law did not require that children have access to specific items like toothbrushes and soap, but the appellate judges disagreed, writing, quote, assuring that children eat enough edible food, drink clean water, are housed in hygienic facilities with sanitary bathrooms, have soap and toothpaste, and are not sleep deprived are without a doubt essential to the children's safety. Leisha Welch, Senior Director of Legal Advocacy and Child Welfare at the National Center for Youth Law, said the panel's ruling wasn't surprising. She said, quote, it should shock the conscience of all Americans to know that our government argued children do not need these bare essentials.
I listened to some of the back and forth of this proceeding, and I'm always fascinated by logic and argument, and there's just no argument. I mean, the lawyer was saying, well, the intent is not to have children in detention for very long, so we shouldn't need that. I mean, you just can't. There's just no logic there.
Well, and that's just not been true, right? Like, I could see a case where you're like, if you're holding them for less than a day, maybe you don't need to keep toothbrushes, right, like, in inventory. But that's not what's happening. Like, that's just not real.
Yeah, right.
And so, like, you do need those things for if you're detaining people for more than 12 hours.
The courts had to tell the administration that children need soap and toothbrushes. Like, what kind of world are we living in?
Yeah. I mean, I think the quote from the plaintiff's attorney was exactly on point, right? Like, it should shock the conscience of all Americans to know that our government argued children do not need these bare essentials.
Well, let's get them out of detention first and foremost. I mean, it's not even, we're arguing.
You're asking big things, Emily.
Let's get the kids out of detention. Maybe that should have been the argument.
Right.
Yeah. Ugh. Another national story. Israel has allowed, then barred, then allowed U.S. Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib from entering the country. This happened shortly after President Trump called on Israel to not let Tlaib and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar into the country. The pair are the first two Muslims in Congress and are sharp critics of Israel's policy towards the Palestinians. Democrats in the United States and Palestinians strongly condemned Israel's decision to bar them. At first, Israel was going to allow the visit, but on Wednesday, Prime Minister Netanyahu held consultations with cabinet members and advisors revisiting the decision. A source who took part in the consultation told Reuters that Israel backtracked because of pressure from Trump. Democrats criticized Israel's decision, with Chuck Schumer saying, quote, denying entry to members of the United States Congress is a sign of weakness, not strength. It will only hurt the U.S.-Israeli relationship and support for Israel and America. Representative Tlaib was born in the U.S. but has family ties in Palestine. Her uncle said, quote, we were surprised today that they banned Rashida. It is unfair and racist that they banned her from visiting her country, Palestine, and her family in Palestine. Netanyahu said that Israel had the utmost respect for the U.S. Congress, but that Tlaib and Omar were promoting legislation of boycotts against Israel. So Israel then reversed the decision specifically to allow Rashida Tlaib a visit based on a humanitarian request for her to visit her 90-year-old grandmother who lives in the West Bank, with the expectation that she is not to promote boycotting Israel during the visit. So I think as a basic expectation, when they're in the U.S. Congress and you are funding various efforts locally and around the world, that you have the opportunity to check in on those investments. So the idea that she's not allowed to go into the country of Israel is just crazy to me.
And I think the wacky part to me different countries are going to deny access to government officials, U.S. government officials. That happens. I guess in my mind, two things come to mind. So first is that the president would interfere with the activities of members of Congress, right? Like that alone, that seems impeachable, right? Like just the idea of that level of interference to then encourage another country to prohibit access to members of Congress who are carrying out their duties. And then the second is, I think I always want to see spine from Congress, right? And I feel this way actually regardless of who holds the presidency. I think it's important that Congress not allow sort of the president to run unchecked, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think that's really essential. Yeah. And so in this case, I feel like the appropriate response is we're not going to pass a budget bill with funding for Israel, right? Like, and like here are the consequences until you allow us access. Israel gets significant, particularly military subsidies from the U.S. And if you're not going to allow our Congress members to investigate that and to see how our funds are being used and to understand sort of the regime that we're supporting, then like there should be consequences for that.
Absolutely.
And I would expect the leaders in Congress to pursue that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure this will continue to develop throughout the day. Democracy Now! Did a longer form effort to dig into this as well this morning, so lots of great coverage on this particular issue.
Absolutely. Also at the national level, accusations of fraud have sent GM stocks plummeting. Shares fell 15% after fraud investigators Harry Markopoulos said GE was concealing deep financial problems. Markopoulos previously blew the whistle on Bernard Madoff's Ponzi scheme, Bernie Madoff's. GE's CEO said the Markopoulos report was full of errors and was, quote, market manipulation pure and simple, because Markopoulos stood to profit from short selling stocks tied to its release. Markopoulos accused GE of hiding $38 billion in potential losses and said the company's cash and debt positions were far worse than it had disclosed. He said, quote, GE's true debt to equity ratio is 17-1, not 3-1, which will undermine its credit status. A disclaimer in the report stated that it was drafted by Forensic Decisions PR LLC, which will get compensation from a third-party entity that could benefit from a decline in GE's share price. The report did not name the entity.
The Trump administration has reversed their decision to allow cyanide bombs to cull wildfire. The poison-filled traps are used by the federal government to kill coyotes, foxes, and other animals for farmers and ranchers.
What?
After sustained public outcry, the Trump administration has walked back its decision to reauthorize controversial cyanide traps for killing wildlife. I said wildfire. It's wildlife.
Yes, this makes more sense. I was really trying to process how cyanide bombs would.
Making sure you're paying attention. Wildlife. Traps are known as M44s and dubbed cyanide bombs by critics. They are spring-loaded devices that emit a spray of sodium cyanide to kill their targets. Traps are most frequently used by the USDA's wildlife services to kill coyotes, foxes, and other animals for private agriculture operators. In an announcement last week, the EPA said that it had authorized government officials to continue using M44s on an interim basis. Decision sparked fury among wildlife advocates and others who decried the decision as a reckless threat to humans and the environment.
Yeah, that just seems wacky. I don't got anything on that other than what? Yes, we should probably not allow cyanide bombs to be... No. No. In Kashmir, cross-border gunfire might have killed 3 Pakistani and 5 Indian soldiers. That is according to the Pakistani army, who also said that, quote, intermittent exchange of fire continues. They also said that 3 civilians had been killed. However, an Indian army spokesperson denied the Pakistani army's statement. He said that no one had been killed. The developments come during a period of increasing tensions between India and Pakistan after New Delhi's Hindu nationalist government last week revoked special status for Indian-administered Kashmir. The decision by India blocks the right of the Muslim-majority state of Jammu and Kashmir to frame its own laws and allows non-residents to buy property there. Telephone lines, internet and television networks have been blocked, and there are restrictions on movement and assembly. Nuclear-armed India and Pakistan have fought 2 of their 3 wars over the disputed territory of Kashmir.
I feel like this is something that's getting a little bit of coverage here and there, but it's a really big deal and needs more time and effort to really understand what's going on there and what's been happening for a very long time.
Yes.
But why this is a new threat and why we should be paying attention.
Absolutely, and I mean it follows right on the heels of the Indian national election, and so kind of it seems to sort of be the start of something potentially much bigger.
Yeah. July was the hottest month on record. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that July was the hottest on record. Global temperatures averaging 62.13 degrees, which is 1.71 degrees above the 20th century average. July bested July 2016 for the hottest month on record by 0.05 degrees, and our records date back to 1880. Biggest increases were in Alaska, Central Europe, and parts of Asia, Africa, and Australia. Heat caused Arctic and Antarctic sea ice to shrink to historic lows. And to top it off, last month, NOAA said that June of this year was the hottest June on record. 9 of the past 10 hottest Julys have occurred since 2005.
Just to be clear, this is international news, not Oregon news.
It's true. It's been cooler here.
Yeah, not the case in Oregon. As we discussed near the top of the hour, it has been disappointingly gloomy, and I will be filing a complaint.
Maybe we should go to Central Europe.
I mean,
It's
yeah.
warmer there.
I mean, like, actually,
But-
sign me up. Or Australia, though it's winter in Australia right now, so I feel like it's hot, but I don't think it's that hot.
Yeah, as you go through all of the climate news, we've talked about sea ice throughout the summer melting at alarming rates. I was also hearing this morning that the number of deaths in India due to monsoons is quite high this summer, 300. So the impact of these increased temperatures is significant all over the world.
Absolutely. Before we move on to local, I want to circle back to the question we started the hour with, which is, would you date someone who has, and I've started to think of it as would/should you date someone with your own name? And so our producers weighed in. So Emily said yes, can never have too many Emilys in the world.
Yep.
I said no, one needs to learn from their mistakes. Wouldn't do it again. Tom Squateri said has and found it charming, which I was like, okay. Zeke has offered that he married a guy whose middle name is his last name, and didn't opine whether that seemed to be a good idea or a bad idea. So we'll see if Zeke adds more there. Joey would date a Joe, and okay, so we've got a lot, and then we got a
text.
We got a text in. And so they said, if I was dating someone who shared my name, storytelling with friends wouldn't be a problem. This is what I talked about. Sorry, interrupting the text. This is what I talked about, that every time I talk would be like, oh, calling this or that. People thought I was like talking about myself. It was very weird. And so the text reads, if I was dating someone who shared my name, storytelling with friends wouldn't be a problem. My friends know better than to keep company with anyone who refers to themselves in the third person, which is fair. That, that's touche. So find better friends. If you have good friends, maybe it works.
Yeah.
So.
You too can weigh in. You could tweet us at XRAY FM or text in at 971-220-5979. Critical question for one of our producers here who's weighing options for an upcoming date.
Yeah. And
we can come together as a community and support her.
Yeah.
It's good. It's very important. We need each other.
That support can be include discouraging bad choices.
Yes.
Like the support can come in multiple forms.
Yeah. Tough love. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got lots of local news. This is X-Ray Radio. Radio is yours.